Welcome back, dear students of class 8. I am your social studies teacher and I am here with a new chapter of your books, chapter number 5, The Revolt of 1857. We'll start with our learning objectives. Causes of revolt, suppression of the revolt, nature of the revolt, beginning of revolt of 1857, causes of failure of revolt and result of the revolt. All these things we are going to study in this chapter now. So let's warm up. Look at the following pictures. You have to identify the picture given above and what was their contribution in the revolt of 57. You have to discuss both of these questions with your teachers and fellow members and write answers in your book. Let's start with application skills now. In the previous chapter, we have read about how the British began bringing Indian territories under their control, starting with the Battle of Plassey in 1757. A century after the British won the Battle of Plassey in 1757, a momentous event occurred in India. Some sepoys or Indian soldiers in British India rose up in revolt against their masters. They were joined by certain native princes who felt that the British were threatening their power. Many ordinary people also became a part of this uprising. This soon grew into a country-wide revolt, posing the first real challenge to the British rule. So first question is, what do you feel caused the sepoys to revolt? Second is, why were they joined by so many rulers and ordinary peoples from different parts of the country? Third question is, what would be the impact of this historic event? So discuss these questions with your teachers. Let's start with our chapter now. For over a century, as the British had been conquering the country, popular discontent and hatred against foreign rule was gaining strength among the different sections of Indian society. There were many revolts by the tribals of Madhya Pradesh, Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. These tribes were the Bhils, Kols and Santals. They had lost their traditional rights to land and forest. As we know that ये जो tribal लोग थे ये totally forest पे dependent थे, but इनके जो traditional rights थे वो इनसे छीन लिए गए थे. Discontentment resulted in a number of uprisings between 1767 and 1857. The most significant among them was the Great Uprising or Revolt of 1857. Several months of increasing tension preceded the actual rebellion in 1857. Historians refer to this revolt as the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Indian Independence. The Great Uprising of 1857 broke out in northern and central India in 1857. It began with a mutiny of the sepoys but soon engulfed wide regions and involved the masses. It was first major attempt to overthrow the British rule from India. So ये जो revolt of 1857 था ये first step था Britishers को India से भगाने का. Now let us see some of the causes of the revolt. The revolt of 1857 was the biggest challenge to British authority. It started with a mutiny of the soldiers but was soon joined by all the sections of Indian society. The revolt was a result of various accumulated grievances of the people against the British rule. Now here are some political causes. First one is Lord Dalhousie's policy of expansion was aggressive and caused great discontent among the Indian subjects and rulers. His policy of doctrine of lapse and annexation of states on the grounds of maladministration angered the people of India, especially of Awadh, which was annexed on the grounds of maladministration despite being a loyal ally. By his policy of doctrine of lapse, he annexed Nagpur, Jhansi, Satara, Jaipur, Sambhalpur, etc. He made Nana Sahib an enemy by denying. He also hurt the sentiments of the Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar by not allowing his successors to to stay on in the Red Fort. The successor of Bahadur Shah Zafar were not allowed to use the royal titles. Next point says the British showed scant regard for the treaties they signed with the Indians. Treaties were twisted and broken to serve their interest. Now, here are some economic causes. The British had changed the entire economic structure of India, and changes were introduced to suit their needs. The traditional self-sufficient economy of villages was wiped out. This caused resentment among people of all sections. Now, first point is the dispossession of rulers from their thrones led to retrenchment of thousands of employees. तो रूलर्स को जो उनके थ्रोन से हटा दिया गया था उसकी वजह से काफी सारे एम्प्लॉयज को तकलीफें आई थी. They were deprived of the means of livelihood. The landlords or zamindars were deprived of their estates by the act of abolition of inams. Next point is, beside the decline of cottage industry, the exploitation of the economic resources of India, especially raw materials for the British industry, the tariffs on Indian goods and merchandise had also developed hatred against the British rule. Now, next point is the discrimination of Indians and the Europeans as matter of employment opportunities and social supremacy of the British had given birth to suspicion and dislike for the British. Now, next is social and religious causes. Racism or racial discrimination was believed to be a major reason for the revolt of 1857, wherein Indians were exploited and were kept away from mixing with the Europeans. The whites also started interfering in the religious and cultural affairs of India and tortured them as well. The fear among the people that the British government was determined to destroy their religion and convert all Indians to Christianity. The increasing activities of Christian missionaries and the actual conversions made them by them were taken as a proof of this fear. तो सारे इंडियंस को लगता था कि ब्रिटिश लोग उनके ओरिजिनल रिलीजन्स को छीनकर उन सबको क्रिश्चियन बना देंगे. The policy of taxing lands belonging to temples and mosques lent further support to this mass fear. जब उन्होंने उनके मॉस्क और टेम्पल्स पर टैक्सेस लगाना शुरू कर दिया तो उनका ये जो डर था वो और ज्यादा बढ़ने लगा. The belief that their religions were under threat united all sections of society against a common enemy. Reforms such as the abolition of sati, legalization of widow remarriage, and extension of Western education to women were looked upon by orthodox Indians as example of interference in their social custom of the country. The social discrimination faced due to so-called racial superiority also led to much resentment. Educated Indians were denied promotions and the opportunities for appointment of higher positions. तो एजुकेटेड इंडियंस को वो प्रमोशंस नहीं देते थे और ना ही उनको हायर पोजीशंस पर जॉब मिल पाती थी. This turned them against British. Now next are military causes. The sepoys in the company's army were dissatisfied. They were treated with great contempt by the British officers. In fact, they were discriminated against their British counterparts. They were paid much less salary and were denied promotion. Their boarding and lodging was also of much inferior standard. The company passed the General Service Enlistment Act in 1856, which made it compulsory for all new recruits to serve overseas if need arose. The Hindu felt that it was an attack on their religion and caste. An Indian soldier called Sepoy could not rise above the post of a Subedar. They were unhappy because they would not get any extra allowance or bhatta for serving their distant lands. Now here is a fact file. One of the ways in which British were able to communicate during the revolt was through the use of telegraph. Donald MacLeod, a British official in Punjab, stated the electric telegraph has saved us. Now next is immediate cause. The immediate factor was the introduction of Enfield rifle. The cartridge had to be bitten off before loading it into a gun. Indian sepoys believed that the cartridge was greased with pig fat or made from cow fat. This was against Hindu and Muslim sentiments. Thus, they were reluctant to use the Enfield rifle. This was a flashpoint to enrage the soldiers against the British. This was believed to be the immediate factor for the revolt of 1857. Now next is beginning of the revolt of 1857. The soldiers were simply protesting against the use of greased cartridges, but the government neglected their protest, insisted on the use of cartridges and punished those who refused to obey them. So this is picture of Mangal Pandey. In the first quarter of 1857, when the soldiers of 19th Regiment at Barakpur refused to use the greased cartridges, their leaders were punished and the regiment was disbanded. The revolt began on 29th March 1857. A sepoy named Mangal Pandey of the 34th Regiment fired at his sergeant major and asked his comrades to revolt against the British in defense of their caste and religion. But he and one of his active comrades were captured, tried and executed. On 9th May 1857, 85 sepoys of Cavalry Regiment at Meerut refused to use the greased cartridges. They were punished with 10 years of rigorous imprisonment and disgraced publicly. On May 10, the 3rd Cavalry Regiment at Meerut revolted and infantry also became a part of it. The soldiers released the prisoners, killed some of English officers and civilians and marched to Delhi. They captured Delhi on May 12 and Bahadur Shah II was proclaimed the Emperor of India. The uprising spread to central India, western Bihar and Rajputana in the east. The centers of the revolt of 1857 were at Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, Bareilly, Jhansi and Arrah in Bihar. The real strength. This table shows the leaders and centers of the revolt where it spread from Delhi. So read this table very carefully. Rising was the participation by the sepoys, peasantries, the artisans, laborers and zamindars. Now next is suppression of the revolt. Delhi was recaptured by the British forces on 20th September 1857. The Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar was taken prisoner and deported to Rangoon, now named Naypyidaw, in Burma, now called Myanmar. The Mughal dynasty thus came to an end. This picture shows British troops blow up Kashmiri Gate to enter Delhi. Bakht Khan, Rani Lakshmibai, Khan Bahadur Khan and Kuwar Singh died fighting. Nana Sahib and Begum Hazrat Mahal escaped to Nepal. Tatia Tope was captured and hanged. After the suppression of the revolt, however, the rebel soldiers and the civilian population suffered a terrible fate. The British used utmost brutality and ruthlessness to suppress it. They burned down villages and resorted to public hangings or blowing people off at the mouth of cannons. All these acts of brutality were done to dissuade another mass revolt in future. तो ये सब ब्रिटिशर्स ने इसलिए किया ताकि इसके बाद इंडियंस की कोई हिम्मत ना हो कोई रिवोल्ट करने की. So this is an account of a 19-year-old British officer, Edward Vibart. The orders went out to shoot every person. It was literally murder. I have seen many bloody and awful sights lately, but such a one as I witnessed yesterday, I pray I never see again. The women were all sparred, but their screams on seeing their husband and sons butchered were most painful. I feel no pity, but when some old grey-bearded man is brought and shot before your very eyes, hard must be that man's heart. I think who can look on this indifference. So this was a note written by 19-year-old British officer, extracted from William Dalrymple's The Last Mughal, The Fall of a Dynasty. Now next is causes of failure of revolt. Though it was widespread, it failed to involve a large section of the population and areas of the country. It could not take shape of an all-India struggle. The revolt did not involve all the people who had been adversely affected by British rule and its policies. Important native rulers like Scindia, Holkar and Raja of Jodhpur did not join the revolt. They instead supported the British. Many soldiers remained loyal to British like Sikh, Rajput, Gurkha. The merchant, western educated middle class, new zamindars of Bengal and moneylenders supported the British rule. The British soldiers were better equipped than the Indian soldiers who fought with outdated weapons. The British had experienced and competent generals who could lead them, whereas Indian leaders, with the exception of a few, did not possess the leadership qualities and military expertise and experience required to lead an army. The revolutionaries did not have enough resources to wage their struggle. The British were financially and militarily stronger. तो जो ब्रिटिश ऑफिसर्स थे वो उनके पास वेपन्स भी अपग्रेडेड थे, whereas इंडियन सोल्जर्स के पास जो वेपन्स थे वो पुराने वेपन्स थे, ओल्ड फैशन वेपन्स थे. प्लस ब्रिटिशर्स के पास एक्सपीरियंस्ड ऑफिसर्स भी थे, जबकि इंडियन के पास ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. The revolt was not properly planned and organized. The British, in addition to advantages mentioned, had the advantage of the post and telegraph. This helped them to communicate with each other, exchange messages and plan strategies and act immediately. तो Britishers ने telegraphs का use किया to communicate efficiently. Now here we have a case study of Awadh. In the Treaty of 1801 signed between the British and the Nawab of Awadh, an arrangement was made that was very beneficial to the company. They were able to use Awadh's vast treasuries repeatedly, digging into them for loans at reduced rates. The Nawabs were ceremonial kings with little influence. However, the British had grown impatient with the arrangement and wanted direct control. In 1856, the East India Company first moved its troops to the border and then annexed the state, which was placed under a chief commissioner, Sir Henry Lawrence. Wajid Ali Shah, then Nawab, was imprisoned and exiled by the Company of Calcutta. In the subsequent revolt of 1857, his 14-year-old son, Birjas Kadra, was crowned the ruler. Following the rebellion's defeat, Kadra and other rebel leaders obtained asylum, a shelter from danger in Nepal. When Lord Dalhousie annexed Awadh in 1856, it was greatly resented by the people as Awadh Nawabs had always been loyal to the British. This evoked sympathy in the people for the Nawabs of Awadh, who was already suffering at the hands of the British. Even a large number of sepoys who came from Awadh were angered and they created an atmosphere of rebellion. This is a picture of Begum Hazrat Mahal. The sepoys rose in revolt on 30th May 1857. They surrounded the presidency where the long siege by the sepoys continued for 8 months. The sepoys were inspired by Begum Hazrat Mahal and Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah. Henry Lawrence died during this period. The fate of the revolt was decided by the failure of the sepoys in Awadh. Though many were more in numbers, they failed to remove the British. Now this is the map of India showing hotspots of Indian revolt in 1857, its centers. Now next is the nature of the revolt. Historians have held divergent views about the nature of the outbreak of 1857. British historians have painted it as a mutiny confined to the army which did not command the support of the people at large. A similar view was held by many contemporary Indians like Munshi Jivan Lal, Moinuddin, both eyewitness at Delhi, and Durgadas Bandyopadhyay among many others. Others described it as a religious war against the Christians or a racial struggle for supremacy between the black and the white. Still others described it a struggle between the Oriental and Occidental civilization and culture. A few described it the result of Hindu-Muslim conspiracy to overthrow the British rule. Some Indian nationalists have called it a well-planned national struggle and as the beginning of the War of Indian Independence. Now next up we have a fact file. Let's see what it says. The revolt of 1857 was much more than a revolt. It was the first war of Indian independence. Discuss the nature of the revolts. So discuss about this with your teachers and friends. Now here we have another case study of Awadh. Rani Lakshmi Bai, famously known as Jhansi Ki Rani, was one of the leading warriors of the revolt of 1857 and a symbol of resistance to the rule of British East India Company in the subcontinent. Her original name was Manikarnika. It is interesting to note that this name comes from the river Ganges, which in Banaras is famous with the name of Manikarnika. There is a Sanskrit shlok on these names, Varanasi Pure Manikarnika Tire. Her nickname was Manu, which comes from her name Manikarnika. Rani Lakshmi Bai was also lovingly called Chabili, which means playful. This name was given to her by the employer of her father, the Peshwa of district who brought Manikarnika up. When she was married to the Maharaja of Jhansi, Raja Gangadhar Rao, she was afterwards called Lakshmi Bai. She valiantly fought against the British and martyred herself for India's freedom. A famous poem, Jhansi Ki Rani by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, beautifully captures the bravery of Rani Lakshmi Bai. A few lines of the poem are: सिंहासन हिल उठे राजवंशों ने ली, राजवंशों ने भ्रुकुटी तानी थी, बूढ़े भारत में भी आई फिर से नई जवानी थी, गुमे हुए आजादी की कीमत सबने पहचानी थी, दूर फिरंगी को करने की सबने मन में ठानी थी, चमक उठी सन 57 में ये तलवार पुरानी थी, बुंदेले हर बोलो के मुंह हमने सुनी कहानी थी, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी. So this was some lines of the poem written by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan. Now after that we have some results of the revolt. The revolt marked the end of East India Company's rule in India and the British Crown took over the administration of British Indian territories in 1858. A cabinet-ranked minister called the Secretary of State for India was put in charge of British political affairs in India. He was responsible to the Parliament. The Governor-General under the company became known as the Viceroy. The Viceroy was answerable to the Crown through the Secretary of State. Lord Canning, the last Governor-General under the company, became the first Viceroy under the Crown. At a Darbar gathering held in Allahabad on 1st November 1858, he read out the Queen's proclamation in appreciation of loyalty shown by the Indian princes. During the revolt, the proclamation discontinued the doctrine of lapse and promised not to annex any more territories. It also promised non-interference in India's religious and social customs. This meant that British would no longer take interest in social and religious reforms. They hoped this would win them the loyalty of the orthodox section of society. To win the loyalty of the zamindars, the British recognized their traditional land rights and also gave them honors and titles. Henceforth, the British pursued the policy of divide and rule to prevent the Indians from uniting. They followed a policy to deliberate discrimination against the Muslim community. To remove all prospects of revolt, the army was reorganized so as to keep it well under the British control. The proportion of European soldiers to Indian soldiers was increased. Strategic military position and crucial military equipments such as artillery were placed exclusively in the charge of European soldiers and officers. The British began to recruit fewer soldiers from Awadh, Bihar, Madras and other areas where there had been revolt in or before 1857. They now recruited more soldiers from among the Sikh, Gurkhas, Pathans, Rajputs and Jats, neutral and had helped the British during the revolt. Although the revolt failed, it marked the beginning of a broader struggle against British rule. So now we have value and life skill. We must develop a sense of patriotism and loyalty towards our country. Good citizens always love, respect and safeguard the interest of the country at all times. So with that, we have completed our chapter. Let's revise what all we have studied. So here we have recapitulation. The revolt of 1857 was quite widespread in area and involved masses to a great extent. Economic, political, social, religious and military causes were responsible for the revolt of 1857. The greased cartridges incident was the immediate cause of the revolt. The revolt of 1857 was a big challenge to British authority. It was led by the sepoys and supported by the common people. The main centers of the revolt were Meerut, Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi, Bareilly and Arra, Bihar. Some important leaders of the revolt were Bakht Khan, Nana Sahib, Tatia Tope, Azimullah Begum Hazrat Mahal, Rani Lakshmibai, Khan Bahadur Khan and Kuwar Singh. The major reasons for the failure of the revolt were its localized and unorganized nature, weak leadership and lack of finances. It took almost a year for British to suppress the revolt. So with that, we came to an end of today's class. Do read this chapter by yourself once again. We'll meet in the next class with a new chapter. Till then, take care of yourself and enjoy yourself.